You know, have you ever said something perfectly clear in your own head, only for it to be completely, utterly misunderstood by the person listening? I mean, maybe it was a totally innocent text message that somehow sparked a massive multi-day argument. Or, oops, a quick email that accidentally offended your entire team. We tend to treat communication like it's this vague, soft skill, or honestly, just a lucky guess. But what if I told you it isn't magic at all? Actually, it's a concrete, engineerable system. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to look at communication straight through the lens of a systems engineer. We'll break down exactly how a thought travels from your brain to someone else's without losing its shape along the way. All right, so here is the 6-step blueprint we're going to follow to make sure your message actually survives all the noise out there. 1. The communication ecosystem loop. 2. The 8 interference filters. 3. Fortifying with the 7 Cs. 4. Selecting your delivery pathway. 5. Mastering high-stakes delivery. And finally, 6. The master communicator dashboard. So let's jump right into section 1, the communication ecosystem loop. Okay, let's dive into this. To fix literally any system, you first have to understand how it mechanically operates, right? Think of it kind of like industrial pipelines, valves, and junctions. We don't communicate in a vacuum. We live in a heavily saturated, high-noise ecosystem. Your message, well, it's a fragile signal trying to navigate through a really complex labyrinth of both external and internal noise. If you don't deliberately engineer that signal to survive the journey, it is absolutely going to break down before it ever reaches its destination. This is a brilliant way to picture the continuous exchange system that we call communication. Notice the root word right there in the center, the Latin word communicare, which simply means to share. It's a continuous, flowing loop between 4 key nodes. First, the sender initiates the signal. Then, the message is the actual tangible information payload you're trying to share. Next, the channel is your pathway. Face-to-face, a piece of writing, a quick phone call. And finally, the receiver is your destination point. Understanding this continuous loop is absolutely crucial. It's the very first step to pinpointing exactly where your messages are failing because, let's face it, getting that payload to the destination totally intact is where the real challenge lies. Moving on to section 2, the 8 interference filters. This is how perfect signals fracture. And that brings us to the villain of our story. If communication is just a simple loop, why in the world does it fail so often? Well, think back to that time you were completely misunderstood. This right here is exactly why it happened. A pure, perfect intent hits what we call the receiver's perspective prism. You see, perspectives are these fixed ways of thinking that totally distort meaning. For example, let's say the sender is just politely correcting a minor mistake. But if the receiver is viewing them through the lens of, say, a strict teacher or a harsh boss, that polite intent hits the prism and fractures into a feeling of being completely scolded. The pure signal just shatters. So the crucial takeaway here is understanding exactly what makes up that prism. There are 8 specific interference filters acting as serious environmental noise. Now, some are structural, like language and culture. A simple thumbs up might mean great job to you, but it's actually highly offensive somewhere else. Then you've got internal biases, things like past experience and prejudice. Maybe they're thinking, oh, this shopkeeper cheated me last time, so boom, they instantly distrust you. Add in their current feelings, like maybe they're just having a terrible day, along with personal factors, visual perception, and literal physical environment noise, and you can easily see how a perfectly good incoming payload gets completely warped. All right, let's flip the script. Section 3, fortifying with the 7 Cs. This is our quality control. Now that we actually know the threats we're up against, it is time to equip ourselves and armor up. We fortify our signal using the quality control hexagon. A true master communicator balances 3 core elements: empathy, accuracy, and efficiency. But how? Well, by applying the 7C protocols. Let's group them together to see how they work. First, your payload needs to be courteous and coherent, meaning you execute it respectfully and keep it strictly tied to the main topic. Next, it must be concise and complete, delivering all the required info at once, but using the absolute bare minimum necessary words. Then it has to be clear and concrete, giving undeniable, exact phrases with absolute clarity of intent. And finally, correct. You've got to use perfect language and grammar. Now listen, this isn't just some simple little checklist. It's a critical, fundamental mental process. Step 1, you formulate your raw intent. Step 2, you rigorously apply those 7 C protocols we just talked about, effectively filtering out all the fluff and ambiguity. And step 3, you finalize your fortified payload. A master communicator deliberately engineers their intent, using these specific steps before they ever open their mouth or type a single word. Really, this is how you stop reacting and start directing. Which leads us to Section 4, selecting your delivery pathway. It's time to route the signal. Okay, so your payload is now heavily armored. Fantastic. But honestly, a great package is totally useless if it's sent to the wrong address via the wrong mail carrier, right? We have to strategically route the signal to its destination. Let's look at the media matrix. Instead of just picking a channel randomly, think of this as a highly strategic choice. If you're negotiating a complex deal, verbal is your absolute go-to for structure and detail. But if you need to build trust and really read a room, nonverbal gives you maximum bandwidth for emotion. And what if you need to communicate simply to very large audiences? Well, the visual pathway is all about immediate scale and speed, with a super low risk of misinterpretation. Even within the verbal pathway itself, you still have to choose between oral and written communication. Written communication offers true permanence. Think of a legally binding contract, right? Spoken communication, on the other hand, gives you amazing real-time adaptability. You can instantly pivot and change your message based on the receiver's real-time reactions. But remember, verbal communication is highly, highly fragile. One misplaced word and suddenly, cultural differences breed instant confusion, simply because the whole thing relies entirely on a shared vocabulary. And honestly, this is exactly why the visual channel is so incredibly powerful. By sending a payload strictly through images and pictures, you are entirely bypassing the fragile, complicated code of language. Notice how visual communication just flows effortlessly out to a massive audience. It's literally the ultimate hack. It's the most highly efficient method for skilling a single, unified message simultaneously, completely circumventing those pesky language and cultural barriers. All right, let's shift gears a bit. Section 5, Mastering High-Stakes Delivery, the 3P runway. So, we've built the payload, we've carefully chosen the route. But what happens when the pressure is really on? Let's talk about the high-stakes execution of a fortified message. Notice how anxiety peaks way over on the far left of this timeline, what we call the 3P performance runway. Weeks before the big event, you're in the prepare phase. Make no mistake, this is the high-anxiety zone. But as you move into practice days before, starting alone, then moving to a mirror, then escalating to friends for feedback, you enter the calibration zone. And look at that, your anxiety naturally starts to drop. Finally, just minutes before you perform on the execution plateau, you deploy physiological resets, like deep breaths, to completely bypass nervousness. This lets you calmly execute the mental blueprint you've prepared. And when you do finally step up to perform, remember this: you are a full-body broadcast. It is so much more than just your words. Even when you're completely silent, your posture acts as the physical architecture of your confidence. Your face involuntarily displays your true feelings. Touch, like a solid, firm handshake, instantly dictates rapport. Eye contact signals direct, focused interest, while your hands emphasize meaning. And the intentional space you maintain, your personal aura, is constantly broadcasting invisible data to everyone in the room. You are literally communicating with your entire topography, all at once. Finally, we arrive at Section 6, the Master Communicator Dashboard. Let's bring it all together. We've covered the ecosystem, the interference filters, the protocols, the delivery pathways, and the physical execution. Now let's bring all these incredible systems and frameworks together for the ultimate operational climax. This is it, folks, the Master Communicator's Dashboard. Let's enthusiastically trace the journey of the signal one last time. Step 1. The sender formulates and fortifies a pure intent using the 7Cs hexagon. Step 2. That fortified payload is strategically routed simultaneously through calculated verbal words, nonverbal posture, and visual channels. Step 3. Because the integrated payload is clear, complete, and culturally calibrated, it successfully pierces right through the receiver's perspective prism and all those interference filters. And Step 4. Perfect transmission. The idea in the sender's mind perfectly matches the idea in the receiver's mind. We've seen exactly how to engineer this flawless alignment. The tools are literally laid out right in front of you. The 7Cs, the media matrix, the 3P runway. So leave you with this final crucial thought. The next time you go to speak, write, or present, your payload might be ready, but is your signal strong enough to survive the noise? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I seriously challenge you to apply these protocols to your very next conversation.